Those who attended the Universal Being Conference and witnessed the trance at the beginning of this program also had an opportunity to hear Mr. LePar speak about the trance and about the information given by the Council during the trance. For the benefit of those who have not had that opportunity, Mr. LePar has consented to speak during this interview situation about the trance phenomenon and the substance of the information given by the Council. Bill, in the last 10 years that I've known you and been associated with the Sol organization, I have learned how much you have devoted to your role as what is commonly referred to as a channel for the Council. And it is apparent that not only do the trances take a great physical toll, but the time devoted to preserving and publishing the information has taken a lion's share of your life and over nearly 20 years. What is there about the Council and the information that commands such sacrifice and devotion on your part?
Well, that can be answered relatively simple. I've seen the changes that it's made in people's lives. People who are unsure of what to do, not really moving ahead as they had hoped they would, when they come in contact with that information from the Council, it gives them a focal point in life. It gives them some suggestions as how to go ahead and develop what abilities they do have, or develop an attitude towards life that makes them more productive. Therefore, they become happier with life. The Council's information is a very positive type of information. It doesn't paint a Pollyanna picture by any means, but at least it encourages you to try things in life and to look at life in different ways that maybe you have not considered before. It gives you a great deal of hope. In other words, the Council never paints a dark picture and leaves you there. They constantly tell you what the situation is, or what is the best way to approach life, and then make suggestions on how to accomplish that in your everyday life. The Council's concept is that you can't grow in spirituality by sitting around reading books and meditating. That's part of the spiritual growth. What's really necessary is to get out and begin to do things in life. The Council has told us that the quest for spirituality is supposed to be a joyful experience, not something draped in abstinence and doing without. It means that to grow spiritually, it's necessary for you to gain control of your life, gain control of yourself, gain control of your physical aspect, your emotional aspect, and your spiritual aspect, so that you are in control and not being shoved by whatever forces are around you, even moved in such ways by your own basic desires that may not be as productive as a more aesthetic approach, or more aesthetic aspect of your own being.
So what you didn't say was that you consider it to be a sacrifice, or what I hear you saying is that you have grown by participating.
Oh, certainly. When you take a look at what I was 20-some years ago and what I am today, I definitely feel that I have grown. I've seen it in myself, the way I approach life, the way I look at life. Has it been a sacrifice for me? Well, anytime you grow, there's some work involved. If you want to use the terminology sacrifice, fine. But I prefer to look at it this way. What I have is what I have earned. And if I want more in life, that means I have to put more effort out. To me, if you grow spiritually, everything else will come to you. That's one of the concepts that the Council continually reminds us of. There are certain minimum needs that we have to provide for ourselves, but still, if you're not satisfied with that, continue your spiritual quest, continue to build yourself spiritually, and all other things will come. The thing you have to keep in mind is that as you grow spiritually, then you begin to realize what is really more important. You know, it's one thing to say at a certain stage in your life, gee, I would like to have a large, fancy car. In 2 or 3 years, you may have grown to the point where you realize that large, fancy car may not bring you the joy that you wanted. You may want something a little different. It doesn't mean that you can't go with a large, fancy car, but your concepts of what really has value increases. And that's one of the problems with our world today. We don't realize what has value. So therefore, we don't, focus in on anything. We're being moved by all the exterior forces. You turn on your television and look what happens. You're constantly being bombarded by some advertiser telling you that there's something that you absolutely cannot live without. Well, can you live without it, or can't you? There's the question that you ultimately have to decide. As you grow spiritually, you begin to realize, do you really have to have it? Is that really going to bring you happiness? Is that really going to bring you joy? The problem with our society today is that our focus has been moved from a central avenue to all this materialism. We seem to feel as a nation that the more we have, the happier we're going to be. Well, I remember some years ago when you were very fortunate to have a car. Today, most families have 2 or 3 cars, and are they any happier? With the advent of technology, we have more free time. Are we happier? We're constantly running, chasing. That's because there's something lacking in our life. If you take some people that go to different conferences and lectures, they're always searching. Why? Because there's something lacking. I know over the years there are certain conferences that I'm invited to speak at every year. And I remember 20 years ago or 15 years ago when I first went to some of these conferences as a lecturer. I would meet people, and each year going back, these people are still looking. This year they're interested in this one concept. Next year they're will be interested in some other concept. The year before last year they were interested in something else. They're searching. They haven't learned that the only way you're going to find what's lacking in you is to concentrate on the spiritual aspects of yourself. And that means returning to the basic concepts of spirituality. Most of these people who are always searching, that I've seen year after year searching, they get involved in some of these abstract concepts, some of these intellectual trips, and they feel as though that's going to give them the answer. That won't. First of all, if that concept is real, if it takes so much intelligence to understand it, you're going to spend most of your time trying to figure out what it's saying and not be able to do anything. So what happens is you sit around and do nothing. You do nothing with yourself, and you do nothing with your community. The divine truth or the divine principles are not complicated concepts. They're so simple that we fail to see them. And when we do, we fail to recognize that those are divine truths because they are too simple. We feel that it's necessary to grow, in order to grow spiritually, something has to be very complicated. No, this divine essence, or this God, reveals himself to us very simply, and reveals himself to everyone. So his revelation to us is very straightforward, always present. It's a matter of being able, or choosing, I should say, to see it. When you get involved in some of these things, like I mentioned earlier, the abstract concepts, the intellectual double talk, that, I think, is a lot of people's unconscious, maybe, or in some cases it could be conscious, effort to have an excuse for not gaining control of themselves. One of the things that in our society today that we seem to fear is the word of discipline. And many years ago, the council brought this word up. And they said it isn't something to be fearful of. Discipline, if you really know what that word means, does not mean to do without. It means to master oneself or take control of oneself so that you can gain or have what you want. Today in our society, we don't want to hear the word discipline. Even in the metaphysical society, you can't talk very often about discipline. People don't want to hear it. But unfortunately, that's one of the key steps in spiritual growth is discipline of self. That doesn't mean deprival. It means gain control of self. Spirituality is not necessarily an internal thing, as most people choose to believe. In actuality, what it is an external activity. If you really want to grow spiritually, you have to get out of the cave, you have to get off of the mountaintop, and you got to come back down to earth and start dealing with people. You've got to make life a joyful experience, not one of depriving oneself of everything, you know, like the old monks where they used to dress in hop sacking and put ashes on their forehead and beat their breast, mea culpa, mea culpa. That isn't spirituality. That is a life of severe discipline. For what reason? How can you grow if you live in isolation? Is that spirituality? Spirituality is being able to relate in a godly way or in a godly manner with others. If you're in a cave, or you're always in your own little world meditating all day long, you're not living in life. You're not living in the world. It'd be easy to be spiritual in that sense. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why I've dedicated 20-some years, because it's a very positive attitude towards life. It tells you to take control of your life. It gives you suggestions on how you may do it. It tells you that life is to be a joyful experience, not filled with sadness and sickness and all this other stuff. Those are the basic essentials of what has kept me going all these years.
And I was wondering if you could put together briefly your reactions to the Council's conversation about the chakras and how they relate.
Well, I think that they give a much better understanding of the real purpose of the chakras. You know, in the pop literature that's available in the metaphysical field, they concentrate on the chakras as power centers in the body. Well, this may be the case, you know. In fact, the Council even made reference to it. But the real importance of the chakras is that it is levels that lie within the man. They are psychological levels that we have to deal with. And in dealing with them properly, it unites the physical consciousness with the spiritual consciousness. It allows an avenue for the spiritual awareness or the spiritual consciousness to impregnate the physical consciousness, or the consciousness that we're experiencing right now. By understanding the limitations that certain aspects of these chakras put on us, and the ability to, the opposite, the avenue of growth that they provide, we can begin to make changes in ourselves that we can actually keep track of.
In a preface to the discussion of the chakras, the Council mentioned a king and his children who became wayward, and a steward who returned with the light for the wayward children. And I was wondering if you could tie the two of those. How did it happen that the Council led into the discussion of
They
the
have
chakras?
ways of putting things together. It's unbelievable. Over the 20 years, I'll tell you. The story that they told in the trance, sure, there are parallels there, and they can be put together very neatly. But the best way to take that is to look at them as two separate examples or two separate forms of instruction or enlightenment. The story of the goodly king father, I think what's important to realize is some of the symbolism used, such as when the children, because they just weren't happy, you know, they thought that dad should see them in a different light or treat them in a different way, or they should be respected in a different way in the family unit, decide to leave the household. And in that part of the story, the father walks them down to the end of the garden, the walled garden, to the gate. And he opens up the gate wide and he says, here, you know, you can have all this, but be smart. Don't go into areas you're not capable of handling. Because if you do, you're going to be stuck there and lost there till I send my steward with a lighted torch to bring you back. All right. What that story tells us is, first you have to go to the symbolism. You have to know something about symbolism. And the walled garden is the area of abundance, of the area where everything is provided, say like the mansion of the divine essence, where everything is there, everything we need. When the Father took them to the end of the walled garden and allowed them to leave of their own choice, if you recall the story, the gate was never closed, which is the way the Council tells us that this divine essence, when we left our rightful place in His, divine presence, we weren't shut out forever. That gate was always open, or that door was always open when we choose to come back. Even those of us who would stray too far, where we'd be totally confused and lost in the material manifestation or material creation, that eventually a light would be sent to us that would bring us back. All right, this is the light of spirituality. This is the realization of what are the basic fundamentals of spirituality, and how well have we made an effort to apply those to our everyday life. What was our success rate? What was our effort rate? You see, so there's never that total rejection. Even though the children rejected the Father never rejected the children. So He left the door open, the chance to return. You see, and even the help to return. If we remember the one statement, in time, a light will be sent to you. That is the faith, the hope, the inner awareness that we are tied in with this divine essence and we cannot be separated from it. And the divine essence, of course, is the God. Whatever God, whatever name you put on your God, that's it.
A number of people have been associated with you, with the Council, and with the organization for a number of years, and have had an opportunity to study and to hear the trance information, either firsthand or read it. If you had to leave somebody with the very kernel, the very essence of that information, what would you give them? What would be the most important thing you could leave with them?
As far as what the Council has said?
Yes.
Well, I think I began to get into that in the last question. The unavoidable situation or future is that sooner or later we are going to have to return to our original source, back to that household, that garden that the Council talked about. We are going to have to be willing to claim our godly state or our mansion in the hereafter, regardless of how hard we fight that spirituality, that responsibility, this divine essence will, when we return, pick us up and bring us to his bosom in a loving gesture of acceptance. That's unavoidable. The council, now I've used some traditional terminology there, but it's whatever your God is. The council basically says that it's senseless to keep fighting. Why not just give in to the goodness that lies in each person? That, give in to the goodness that's there and begin to experience a joyful walk back to your God. That is, I think, what the council has been trying to tell us these 20 years, and probably will try to tell us forever how long these trances go on. Spirituality is a joyful condition of consciousness.